President Dilma Rousseff gave a scathing speech to the U.N. General Assembly this week in what some are calling the most serious diplomatic fallout over revelations of U.S. spying. Let's have a look.
The United Nations General Assembly made its first resolution in 1946, making nuclear disarmament as their leading goal. Today, the objective of the elimination of weapons of mass destruction and the regulation of conventional arms remains. That was the message underscored by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon during the meetings at the UN General Assembly. It was upon that stage where two issues took to the spotlight: chemical weapons in Syria and nuclear arms in Iran. In his first UN speech, Iran's new leader Hassan Rouhani said Iran is not interested in atomic weapons and seeks a better relationship with the West.
The Islamic Republic of Iran is prepared to engage immediately in time-bound and result-oriented talks to build mutual confidence and remove all of mutual uncertainties with full transparency.
As an ally to Syria, Iran has suffered from sanctions. The U.S. is willing to lift those sanctions if Iran is willing to make changes.
For while the status quo will only deepen Iran's isolation, Iran's genuine commitment to go down a different path will be good for the region and the world.
The new leader of Iran is positioning himself as a new leader with tolerance and understanding, and says nuclear weapons have no place in his country's future.
Didi Benke, Dr. Stephen Bronner, Dr. Michael McCoy, and Seth Weinberger from University of Puget Sound in Washington, D.C. stay with us to talk more about why this was such a blow to the U.S. And let's first talk about, we saw some of the footage from the UN General Assembly this week. Let's just talk about your overall reaction to some of the speeches that you heard. And we'll start with you, Dr. McCoy.
Actually, I think the biggest thing to come out of the General Assembly wasn't even any of the speeches, it's what didn't happen, the conversation between President Rouhani and President Obama. They seem to have tried to recover from that with the phone call from the president. You know, White House has made this big press about, well, the president talked to him on the phone, but that's a pretty notable snub. I mean, someone comes all the way across the world, comes to New York, and doesn't meet with the president, and I think it shows the difficulty that President Rouhani is going to have balancing all these different interests in Iran versus sort of moderate factions who want some sort of negotiation with the U.S. versus hardliners who are still want a more adversarial relationship.
We want to talk more about that, but we also had quite a bit of a snub, if you want to say, I think, from the Brazilian president. She not only preceded the President Obama beforehand, but had some harsh words as well, Dr. Bronner.
Well, this is a situation in which President Rousseff criticized President Obama for the spying, cyber spying that was done on Brazil. And it's sort of like a kid with his hand caught in a cookie jar, because this goes on all the time. People know it goes on all the time.
But I think she was particularly upset because this was obviously they had looked into her phone records as well.
Yeah, and the extent is an open question, how much or how little. But the point is that this is a pretty common currency within foreign affairs. And if you think of it as part of a new strategy of foreign relations and war, it's just no one can admit that that's the case, because it's an impingement upon sovereignty.
Well, the Brazilian president calls cyberspace as a weapon of war through espionage and sabotage.
That's clearly true.
Didi?
I'm sorry, but I really think she was whining, and it was ridiculous that she took the UN and took this time to try to scold our president and our country for this. It goes on all the time, just like you said. Get over it, deal with it, and we've got more important things to do. And I think it was a much bigger deal that the Iranian president snubbed our president not once, twice, but really 3 times, because they kept trying to make it work. So it's really getting old that they come to our country, come to the UN, and want to just blast us. So, you know, I think what the Brazilian president did was just over the top ridiculous.
Well, she brought up some interesting points, though. Should the UN oversee a new global legal system to govern the internet?
Good luck with that.
I have to agree on that point. I think there's also a part of the story that it's not getting as much attention, which I think this also talks about just how bad our relations are with Latin America. I mean, this has been going on for the past decade. You know, we have Chavez, you have Morales in Bolivia, president of Ecuador, and part of what I saw Rousseff's speeches is almost trying to grab that Chavez mantle. I mean, Chavez.
I took the same thing. I think we're all
Chavez
shaking our head in agreement
came
here.
to the UN, did the same thing. He's like, I smell the fire, or something about
Yeah,
I smell like
exactly.
Lucifer was here, or something like that. But this is a much more important. I mean, Chavez kind of grandstanding. This is a much more important issue. We saw this come up even in the German elections, U.S. spying. So she is grabbing an issue that's really current right now in global politics, but I see this more in the issue of U.S. Latin American politics.
Well, what should Obama do right now? I mean, should he address this? I mean, really, how does he some harsh words there. What does he do now?
I mean, honestly, I think, again, just we keep coming back to this issue about Iran, and I think that because ultimately all politics is local, he's got to worry about domestic politics more. Most Americans are more concerned about what's going on in the Middle East and Latin America. So this is an issue that I think internationally have to deal with, but I think publicly, I doubt we'll even hear him talk. If he talks about it, I would be
I don't think he
surprised.
should address it. I think that goes below him. I think what she did was over the top ridiculous. I said, if you take the UN, I mean, they go on and on about, someone spied on me, somebody looked at my phone records. Well, guess what? Get her over it. You are a leader in the world, and that's what happens right now. That's what happens to everyone. So it's just part of our life now.
See, I think it's true. There's not very much that you can say, and probably not that much you could say, but it's a serious thing, I think, in the street in the Middle East. And if you think of Israel's cyber attacks on Iran, this can be a very heavy thing. And part of the hassle here, the underlying problem is, I think, conspiracy talk. And that's all over. The idea of warmongering, for example, I saw in Al Jazeera some of the comments, not Al Jazeera's report, but the comments to the report, where the Kenyan mall bombing was blamed on Zionists and the USA, and it's always the US CIA, and it's always something that happens behind the scenes, and so in some way it might actually be an interesting thing to see what might happen by addressing it.
No, we love the
in terms of
insights from our
Brazilian.
panel right here, but we're going to check in with our Skype guest right now, Seth Weinberger. He is down in Washington, D.C., and I think you've been hearing some of our discussions right now, but we're talking about the U.N. General Assembly and what happened this week. Your thoughts and your thoughts on the Brazilian president's speech?
Well, I think what happened is a little bit slightly more serious than I think people are making it out to be. To listen into, or at least to even monitor the conversations, even at the metadata level of a leader of a country, is a pretty significant, at a minimum, diplomatic breach of diplomatic protocol, and at a maximum is actually a pretty serious breach of sovereignty, which someone has already been mentioned. I mean, I think if Obama had found that another country had been doing the same thing to the United States, I think you'd see a similar kind of response.
Well, what do you think the president should do?
Well, he shouldn't do anything. I mean, that doesn't mean that he should actually do anything, and I don't think he should even necessarily change the program. The program exists because he believes it's an important part of American national security. But as I think the first person mentioned, it is a common part of diplomacy that people spy on each other. But when you get caught, and when you get caught, there are punishments. So, I mean, what happened was he got scolded. Obama got scolded at the UN. It's not a huge problem, I don't think. But that's what happens. If you spy on other people, when you spy particularly on other people in other countries, and even more particularly on the leaders of those countries, when you get caught, you're going to be embarrassed, and you're going to be humiliated, and you're going to be scolded. That's sort of the way the game works.
Okay, so
I don't think we should be embarrassed. I don't think our country should be embarrassed. I think that's ridiculous.
But it is embarrassing. It's almost like it's embarrassing to be caught, but then the ramifications of being caught.
It's the kid with his hand.
It really is.
Well, she can get over it. She's a public official. That's the way it is in the world now.
That's how she's supposed to respond. I think we would be enraged if we found that the same thing was happening to our.
Oh, you don't think they're trying to spy on us? Really?
We would be publicly enraged. It's the same way we feel about China copyrighting
there's more
things in
important
our
things.
country.
People are dying in Syria. There are all kinds of more important things. And this woman from Brazil is saying, "Oh, we're being spied on." I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Weinberger.
That's just not how politics works. I mean, they have to respond.
No, but he's not going to, though. You just said he shouldn't respond.
She had to respond. The Brazilian president had to respond. Her country's sovereignty was violated. She had to respond. Obama's not going to do anything. He needs to take his very, very small dose of medicine and move on. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have a little bit of a disagreement on that, but let's talk about Iran right now also and what happened down there. Do you think that diplomacy will ever prevail here, or is this just an illusion right now?
I do.
Okay.
And I actually said that publicly about a year ago. And I disagree with what both of you said with this, for a simple reason. President Rouhani is in a very delicate situation. It's almost incomprehensible in the United States. He's made certain overtures. There's now an expectation for more overtures to the West, and at home, the reactionary forces are still the same. They haven't lost power. And what I'm talking about particularly is the Revolutionary Guards. And President Rouhani has to do two things at once. He has to talk to the West and talk to his own domestic base. And for the domestic base, the reaction, for him to have done the phone call is as bad as shaking hands.
Dr. Bronner, final thoughts.
Well, I should have back to the question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Close.
Well, I actually agree with everything you just said. I think he has to walk that delicate balance, but I think the fact that the Obama administration wasn't ready for that walk and it sort of almost publicized that there was going to be some meeting and then have to pull it back, that was, again, in the broad scheme of things, not a big deal, but I do believe that was the big headline coming out of it. Now, having the phone call, I think, recovered from that, and I believe you're absolutely right. This balance that President Rouhani is going to have to walk will be the major issue going forward, but because he has to walk that balance, I am ultimately pessimistic about whether diplomacy will work, because diplomacy at what end? I don't see the end where any Iranian official says we're giving up a nuclear program. I can't imagine that outcome.
I think we all agree to disagree on some of these topics. So, Dr. McCoy, thank you. Dr. Bronner, thank you. Dee Dee, thank you. And stay with us, everyone. President Obama is facing another showdown this week. Democrats and Republicans are talking all weekend, but if they can't agree to disagree, like we are here on Fresh Outlook, the government will shut down at 12:01 Tuesday morning.